The middle of the 4th century BCE, the Italian peninsula stands divided among several political entities. In the north, Etruscan city-states undergoing a period of decline. In the south, Greek colonies, collectively known as Magna Graecia. In the central portion of the peninsula, two major players operate, the Roman Republic and the Samnite Federation. Both sides were in a phase of expansion. Rome was extending its influence west and south of Latium. The Samnites were pushing down from the Apennine Mountains into the coastal valleys. The point where their interests intersected was the region of Campania, the most economically developed territory in central Italy. The thesis of this video, the First Samnite War, was not a chance conflict. It was the result of a structural contradiction between two expanding powers. Control over Campania meant control over the peninsula's key agricultural resources and trade routes. Let us examine the factors that led to war. In 390 BCE, Rome suffered a Gallic invasion. The city was captured and partially destroyed. The Romans paid a ransom and were granted safe passage to evacuate. This event had long-term consequences for Roman policy. The first consequence was military. Over the following 50 years, Rome undertook a comprehensive program of defensive measures. The Servian Wall was constructed, stretching approximately 11 kilometers. The fortifications reached heights of 10 meters and thicknesses of 4 meters. The wall protected an area of roughly 426 hectares. The second consequence was political. Rome's relations with the Latin League underwent significant changes. The Latin League was a confederation of Latium city-states, bound together by common religious cults and mutual defense treaties. Formally, Rome was one member among many. In practice, it held a dominant position. After 390, tensions within the League increased noticeably. Several Latin cities, Tibur, Praeneste, Velitrae, attempted to break free from Roman control. Armed clashes between Rome and individual Latin communities are recorded throughout the 380s and 370s. By the 350s, Rome had restored control over the League, though this required considerable resources. Simultaneously, the Roman Senate pursued a policy of extending influence southward toward Campania. In 354 BCE, Rome concluded a treaty with the Samnite Federation. The terms of this treaty are only partially known. According to available evidence, both parties recognized mutual spheres of influence. The boundary was established along the Liris River. Territories north of the Liris were acknowledged as Rome's zone of interest, territories to the south as the Samnites' zone of interest. The Treaty of 354 held the status of foedus equum, a treaty between equals. Both parties assumed an obligation not to conduct military operations against each other. Violation of the treaty carried religious and political consequences.
The Samnite Federation occupied mountainous territory in the central Apennines. Its area was approximately 15,000 square kilometers. The terrain was predominantly mountainous. Less than 20% of the land was suitable for agriculture. The Federation's political structure differed markedly from Rome's. The Samnites had no single central city. The Federation united 4 tribal leagues. First, the Hirpini. They occupied southern Samnium. Their primary occupation was herding. Second, the Caudini. They were positioned in the western region, closer to Campania. They controlled the mountain passes. Third, the Pentri, the central tribe and the most numerous. They formed the core of the Federation's military forces. Fourth, the Caricini, the northern group bordering the territories of the Marsi and Paelini. Each tribe retained internal autonomy. Federation-wide decisions were made by a council of tribal representatives. In times of war, a single commander was elected, the Embratur. Samnium's economy was based on pastoralism. The primary livestock were sheep and pigs. Agriculture played a secondary role. Trade was limited to exchange with neighboring communities. No major craft centers existed. The demographic situation in Samnium was characterized by steady population growth amid limited resources. This created structural pressure that demanded external expansion. The mechanism for relieving demographic pressure was the practice of Ver Sacrum, the sacred spring. The essence of the practice, in a designated year, a community would consecrate to the gods all offspring born that spring. Upon reaching adulthood, these individuals were obligated to leave tribal territory and establish new settlements. Ver Sacrum was not a regular practice. The decision to perform the ritual was made during periods of crisis, famine, epidemic, or overpopulation. Nevertheless, sources record several waves of Samnite migration during the 5th and 4th centuries. The direction of migration was predominantly west and south, toward the coastal plains. By the 340s, Samnite expansion had reached the borders of Campania. Campania was located on Italy's western coast, south of Latium. The region covered approximately 13,000 square kilometers. Geographic features: extensive plains, volcanic soils, access to the sea. Campania's agricultural potential was the highest on the peninsula. Soils enriched by volcanic ash produced yields 2 to 3 times above average. The region produced grain, grapes, and olives. The climate permitted up to 3 harvests per year. Beyond agriculture, Campania controlled the trade routes between the Greek colonies of the south and the Etruscan cities of the north. The ports of Neapolis and Dicarchia supported maritime commerce. Overland roads connected the coast to the peninsula's interior. The center was Capua. In terms of population, the city ranked second in Italy after Rome. Estimates range from 30 to 50,000 inhabitants. Capua's economy was built on craft production, bronze goods, ceramics, perfumes, and transit trade. Capua's military capacity was limited. The reasons: first, the absence of a citizen militia tradition. The Capuan aristocracy preferred to employ mercenary contingents. Second, political fragmentation. Competing factions within the city were unable to coordinate defensive efforts. Third, a prolonged period of peace. Several generations of Capuans had not participated in major military conflicts. Thus, Campania represented a territory of high economic value with low level of military protection. The immediate trigger for war was a chain of events involving the Sidicini tribe. The Sidicini occupied a small territory north of Campania, between the Liris River and Mount Tifata. Their principal city was Teanum Sidicinum. In 343 BCE, Samnite forces launched military operations against the Sidicini. The objective: to secure control over the mountain passes leading into Campania. The Sidicini appealed to Capua for help. The Capuans decided on military intervention. Their reasoning: Sidicine territory served as a buffer zone between Campania and Samnium. Losing this buffer would open a direct path for the Samnites to the Campanian plains. A Capuan levy marched to aid the Sidicini. Battle was joined near Mount Tifata. The result: defeat for the combined Capuan and Sidicini forces. Sources provide no details of the engagement. What is known is that Capuan losses were substantial. Following the defeat, Capua lost the capacity to defend itself. Samnite forces gained access to Campanian territory. The Capuan Senate resolved to seek help from an external power. Options were limited. The Greek colonies of the south were too distant and lacked sufficient land forces. The only viable candidate was Rome. A Capuan embassy arrived in Rome in the summer of 343. The envoys appeared before the Senate with a request for military assistance. They proposed alliance terms, military cooperation in exchange for recognition of Roman seniority. The Roman Senate declined the request. The grounds, the existing treaty with the Samnite Federation, dated 354. Providing military assistance against the Samnites would constitute a violation of the foedus. The Capuan envoys employed an alternative mechanism. They pronounced the formula of deditio in fidem, complete and unconditional surrender to Roman authority. The legal substance of deditio, the surrendering party renounces sovereignty. All rights to territory, property, and population transfer to the receiving party. Deditio was a unilateral act and required no consent from third parties. The consequences of Rome accepting the deditio. First, Capua ceased to exist as an independent entity. Its territory became Roman property. Second, an attack on Capua now qualified as an attack on Roman property. This created a legal basis for military response. Third, Rome had not formally violated the Treaty of 354. It had not entered into an alliance against the Samnites. It was defending its own territory. The Senate accepted Capua's deditio. A demand was sent to the Samnites: cease military operations on territory now under Roman jurisdiction. The Samnite Federation rejected the demand. Rome declared war. Let us summarize the analysis. The First Samnite War was the result of a collision between the expansionist interests of two powers. Rome sought control over Campania's resources and the region's trade routes. The Samnite Federation needed new territories to resettle its surplus population. The Treaty of 354 temporarily delineated spheres of influence. However, Campania lay in the zone where those interests overlapped. The weakness of local political structures, Capua above all, created a vacuum that both sides sought to fill. The mechanism of deditio allowed Rome to formally observe its treaty obligations, while simultaneously obtaining legal grounds for intervention. This decision demonstrates the priority of strategic interests over formal alliance commitments. The war did not begin to defend Capua. The war began to control Campania. In the next part, we will examine the course of military operations, the tactics employed by both sides, the key battles, and the terms of the peace treaty of 341 BCE.